The Federal Reserve finally woke up and decided to stop raising interest rates. They also warned us about what's coming next, saying that prices will never return to what they were before 2020. In addition, the government will employ the reverse repo option to help replenish its general treasury account. But here's the big one. When specifically challenged about the United States' deteriorating financial situation, which includes significant deficits and debt, Jerome Powell replied empathetically, "Under no circumstances will the Fed finance government debt." If this is accurate, it's a huge problem. Keep watching to learn about what's next for the US economy and subscribe to Finance Professor. Number 1. Prices are permanently high. Let's start by looking at the pricing and why it will never return to where it was before 2020. The total money supply in the United States increased by just over 50% in just over 2 years, which is a staggering increase in the money supply. This chart shows the total amount of money in the system by year. It can be seen that before all spending and borrowing that occurred in 2020, the total money supply was around $15 trillion. At the height of all the money printing, in April 2022, the total money supply had reached a mind-boggling $22 trillion. Since the money supply peaked, it has been trending down at the fastest rate since the Great Depression. However, for prices to actually return to the level that they were before all of the money printing began, we would need to see the money supply decrease. This is because the new money that was printed worked its way throughout the economy, driving up the prices of goods and services. Let me be very clear here. When prices are rising, we have inflation. Inflation is simply the measurement of the rate of change in prices. So as inflation moves from 9% to 7% to 5% to 4% to 2%, that means the inflation rate is falling, not the prices. If inflation returns to 2%, where it was for a very long time prior to 2020, that doesn't mean prices return to where they were. Essentially, it basically means that the pace of the price growth is the same as it was before the year 2020. It's becoming less and less likely that we'll experience a significant drop in prices, especially back down to where they were before, given that the inflation rate has now reached 4% and the Federal Reserve has already released the brakes and did not raise rates again despite saying they're likely to do so in the future. Number 2. Rate cuts during inflation. Jerome Powell was also asked about their current projection of future interest rate reductions despite the inflation rate still being over target, and his response was actually quite intriguing. He said that at the moment, interest rates are a little over 5%, while the official inflation rate was reported at 4%, which means the real interest rate is, let's say, 1% for round numbers, because if you're losing 4% a year in purchasing power, but gaining 5% back in return from the interest rate, that means your purchasing power increases. The Federal Reserve does anticipate the rate of inflation will continue to decline from here over the next year or two, eventually falling back down to their 2% target. If inflation drops from 4% to 3%, that will allow them to reduce the interest rates from 5% to 4% while maintaining the same real interest rate. Powell stated that, despite the fact that the interest rates were decreasing, they would do this in order to continue tightening, reducing inflation, and avoid over-tightening at the same time. They would aim for real interest rates to be positive, which would require cutting nominal rates. We're almost halfway through the video. What do you think of the video so far? Subscribe to Finance Professor to know what's next for the US economy. Number 3. Reverse repo slow drain. As I've mentioned before, the Treasury General account needs to be replenished as spending is resumed, which means that over the coming quarters the government will need to borrow like a horse. Powell was also asked about the reverse repo facility and how that may be used as a tool to assist with the government borrowing. Since spending is resumed and the government will need to borrow about $1 trillion in the upcoming quarters, many have predicted that this will put a significant strain on liquidity in the financial markets. However, this is not the case. Well, at least not right away. Over the past 2 years, significant amounts of deposits have flooded into a facility at the Federal Reserve called the Reverse Repo Facility. The amount in the Reverse Repo Facility has fluctuated between $2 and $2.5 trillion over the past year. This facility serves as a sort of overflow for deposits in the system where financial institutions can get an excellent, risk-free return on their money. And now money markets are passing a lot of that through to investors. In particular, the Federal Reserve is paying 5.05% on all balances in the Reverse Repo Facility, so the quality of the money market is improving. When regular interest rates with some risk become significantly enticing, some of the money will be taken out to Reverse Repo Facility and lent out. As government borrowing picks up speed, this essentially means that a larger supply of bonds enter the market. All other things being equal, when more things are sold, it pushes down the price with bonds. When prices go down, interest rates go up. Money will naturally start to flow out of the reverse repo facility and be lent to the government instead of to take advantage of the 5.5%, possibly 6% rates. Keep in mind that there are currently $2 trillion in this facility, so at least for now, there's no strain on the system in terms of liquidity. There is plenty of money, it's just a matter of how high the interest rates go. Number 4. No more government bailouts. The real shocker here was what Powell said about the long term. He was asked directly about the fiscal position of the United States, which included ballooning deficits, a massive debt load, and rising government spending. He stated very clearly that he believes that the country's financial situation and the direction it's headed financially are unsuitable. On being asked very explicitly whether the Federal Reserve would help finance some of the debt, Powell said, under no circumstances. The Fed is currently not allowed to lend money to the government to finance their debts, so this might mean that Powell won't directly finance the debt. They have indirectly done debt monetization. And number 5, the end of the FED. The highlight of the FED is their political independence. The FED are only allowed to do things that operate their guidance given to them by Congress. Given that their mandate calls for stable prices, maximum employment, and financial stability of their financial system, if they determine that the federal government is on an unstable course with its fiscal deficit, it would be against their mandate to support the government in doing so. As a result, they're tightening, raising rates, and allowing their balance sheet to bleed off. It's implied when it's asserted that the government is on an unsustainable path that it will eventually be unable to make interest payments on its own debts. At that point, there will be a financial crisis because their expenses would start to rise. In previous financial crises, the FED issued money to cover the interest on the federal government's debt when it became unaffordable for them to pay it. However, Powell may have been indicating here that we won't do so in the future and won't save the federal government. There's a risk that the Federal Reserve Act will be changed at that point. The Federal Reserve will be incorporated under the Treasury's supervision and it will lose all of its political independence. Remember, the FED exists only because of Congress, and it only acts under the specific direction of Congress. If the existence of the federal government is threatened by the separation that Congress has given to the FED, it will no longer allow the separation to exist. And when Congress has full control over the money printer, the inflation we've seen over the last couple of years will look like a warm memory that we will wish to return to. And that is all for today. Did you find the video informative? Do you think the FED will lose its independence? Comment down your thoughts below. If you have any suggestions regarding the next video, do mention it in the comment section below. Subscribe to Finance Professor for more such informative content, and press the bell icon to never miss a video from us. If you've enjoyed the video, give it a like, and we'll see you in the next one.